Chapter 374. The only thing worth comforting was the matter of Pei Lang. She had always been very clear that the Shun family was like a big tree that attracted the wind, and it was not good to be involved in the matters of the palace. However, she was just an unmarried daughter, and did not have the chance to come into contact with deeper things. Moreover, many things had changed in this life, so he could only let Pei Lang be a spy. Fu Xiuyi's temperament was suspicious, and he would study a lot of things that were sent to his door, so it was inevitable that he would not investigate her. But 1 year later, Fu Xiuyi would take the initiative to recruit Pei Lang, and Pei Lang would push the boat with the current, and it would be much easier. As for subduing Pei Lang, there was still a bit of luck involved. That year when Fu Xiuyi subdued Pei Lang, it was also because one of his subordinates had a friendship with Prefectural Magistrate Pei's residence. Thus he was able to find out about Pei Lang's background. At that time, it was because Fu Xiuyi had settled down Luing that Pei Lang was ultimately used by him. The Pei siblings were people who were unmoved by force or persuasion. They had their own ideas. For example, Lu Ying, after falling into prostitution, one could no longer see a trace of the daughter of an official's family. She was at ease being a prostitute, and perhaps recalling her original identity made her feel pain. As for Pei Lang, he didn't even think about revenge. He was content as a teacher. Lu Ying was not willing to admit her own identity and was resentful towards the Pei family for abandoning her to protect her younger brother. When Pei Lang came forward, Lu Ying would resist even more intensely. But Shen Miao gave Lu Ying a docile way to live. To be able to control Lu Ying was to be able to control the guilty Pei Lang. After a few years, Pei Lang, who had gone through many trials and tribulations in court, would be more mature, and when he saw Shen Miao's words today, he would feel that it was full of loopholes. However, Pei Lang had yet to become an official. No matter how smart he was, he still lacked experience. "Young lady, it is better to rest early." Jingzhe smiled. "Tomorrow one still need to follow foreign to see the residents at the eastern side of the city." Shen Miao nodded. In this half a year, at least the family would be separated, and he would be able to start a new residence. However, she didn't expect that her plans couldn't keep up with the changes. On the morning of the second day, after Shen Miao had her meal, Luo Shuiyan's maid came over and said that after Shen Miao changed her clothes, she would go to the residence. After all, this was a residence that he would be living in the future. Whether it was comfortable or not, he would have to take a look before deciding. But before Shen Miao could dress up, someone came from the palace. She wanted Luo Shuiyan to make a trip to the palace, and the palace maid also said that if there was no problem, Shen Miao could also be brought along. Although he said so, it was almost like an order. Shen Xian and Shan Qiu's faces immediately darkened, and Luo Shuiyan was also a little confused. Even though she was a noblewoman in the capital, she was usually not in the Ding capital, and was not familiar with those furins in the circle of noblewomen. It would be a joke if the one who invited was a lady from the palace. No matter how she thought about it, Luo Shuiyan did not have much of a relationship with the women in the palace. Shen Xian and Shen Qiu thought further. Luo Shuiyan did not have any relationship with the females, but was requested to bring Shen Miao along. The drunkard's intention was not in the wine. Could it be that they had some ideas on Shen Miao? Once it was about Shen Miao, they would be especially nervous. Shen Xian said, "It is better for me to accompany foreign to the palace." "What are you going to do?" Luo Shuiyan said. "I didn't invite you here, and you think it's not troublesome enough. I will bring Jiao Jiao along." She hesitated for a moment. With so many people, one would not do anything out of line. Moreover, I am not a female without the strength to truss a chicken. She wanted to say that if there was anything wrong, one would not necessarily be at a disadvantage if one were to fight. Shen Xian nodded his head. "One think that the current situation is not that tense. You can rest assured and go." Luo Shuiyan pulled Shan Miao's hand and boarded the horse carriage that the palace arranged. She originally planned to go to the residence early in the morning, but because of this matter, no one knew if it was a blessing or a curse. Chapter 375. Shen Qiu and Shen Xian were at the residence's doors, and seeing the horse carriage leaving, they asked uneasily, "Father, mother and younger sister will be fine, right? I will make a trip to the Ministry of War." Shen Xian turned around. "You stay in the residence. If anything happens, you will be able to provide support." Shen Qiu nodded. In the carriage, Shan Miao's little face was taut, but there were all kinds of guesses in her heart. She didn't feel that she was in any danger. She didn't have anything on her that was worth scheming against. Moreover, she knew better than anyone about the ways of the ladies in the palace. Even if they had a strategy, it wouldn't be so brazen today. The imperial family cared about their reputation the most. If something happened to her in the palace today, the imperial family would be the first to be blamed. If it was the other way around, Xin Miao's gaze was heavy. The females in the palace did not have any relationship with Luo Shuiyan, but they summoned Luo Shuiyan to the palace to speak. Perhaps they wanted to inquire about something from Luo Shuiyan. The drunkard's intention was not wine, but what was it? The Xin family? Or was it Xin Xian? But why would she suddenly pay attention to Xin Xian? Xin Xian had been keeping a low profile in the capital these days, and did not have any connection with Fu Xiu like in the last lifetime. Even if the imperial family wanted to suppress the Xin family, they would have to have a good reason to do so. Could it be that there was already a reason for that? Xin Miao was a little confused. Wanting Luo Shuiyan to bring her into the palace should be a warning. If anything were to happen, Xin Miao, her daughter, would not be able to protect her. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. Xin Miao could not help but feel a little nervous. There were many things in this lifetime that were different from the previous lifetime, especially the big picture of Ming Qi. She tried her best to avoid and delay the tragedy of the Xin family, but it was inevitable that fate would go wrong. What was it this time? Luo Shuiyan saw that Xin Miao's expression was not good and thought that Xin Miao was afraid and said with heartache, "Jiao Jiao, do not be afraid. It is only entering the palace to talk to the ladyships. It'll be over soon. We'll come back to look at the house then." Xin Miao smiled faintly but was still somewhat absent-minded. When they reached the entrance of the palace, there was already a palace maid who was there to receive them. When she saw both of them, she led them in. On the way, Luo Shuiyan asked the palace maid who looked like a female official which consort had invited them. The female official smiled but did not answer, only saying that she would know when she arrived. At this time, in the palace's Radiance Hall, two beautiful women were laughing and chatting in the hall. The woman on the left had her hair combed into a fairy bun and wore a red palace dress embroidered with gold. She was gorgeous, and although she was smiling as she spoke, her eyes were somewhat absent-minded. She was extremely disrespectful to the woman beside her. Although she acted like this, the woman beside her did not get angry. Instead, she replied with a smile. This woman wore an apricot-colored dress with plum blossoms on it. Her appearance was not as outstanding as the woman on the left, but she appeared gentle and polite, and also elegant. These two people were not others, but the palace consorts that invited Xin Miao and her daughter to the palace today. The one on the left was consort Su Xian, and the elegant one on the right was consort Dong Shu. It is fine that His Majesty wants us to invite Xin Foreign over, but why also bring the young lady of the Xin family? Consort Su Xian was somewhat impatient, going for a long time and not coming back. It is really such a big face. The general residence is not a short distance from the palace. Consort Dong Shu smiled. Jie, do not be anxious. Consort Su Xianfei laughed. Mimi, you're used to being a good person? She suddenly thought of something and smiled mischievously. Speaking of which, that young lady of the Shun family had once admired His Ninth Highness. Could it be that you are very satisfied with her? That's why you protect her like this? Consort Dong Shu's expression slightly stagnated before she smiled. Jie really know how to joke? It is just that. Since His Majesty wants both of us to come over, it is better to do proper business. That fifth Xin young lady is only following her mother, and in a while the palace maids will bring her out. Chapter 376. Bringing out Emperor Wen Hui's name, the domineering consort Su Xian could not say anything. Just as she was about to say a few sarcastic words, she suddenly saw her own female official coming in. Consort Su Xian asked, "Arrived?" The female official nodded her head, and in a short while, Luo Shuiyan and Xin Miao walked in. After greeting the two females, Xin Miao followed Luo Shuiyan and stood at the side with her head lowered, not lifting it up. One could only hear a slightly sharp voice, "Shun Foreign, this must be your daughter. Lift up your head and let Bin Gong take a look." Xin Miao paused for a moment and slowly lifted her head up to meet the two females' sizing gaze. When she saw clearly who the person sitting on the right was, her heart could not help but tighten and felt that the blood in her entire body was boiling. Consort Su Xian on the left was Prince Zhou and Prince Jing's consort mother, and Consort Dong Shu on the right was Fu Xiuyi's birth mother. At this moment, Consort Dong Shu looked over with a smile and said to Consort Su Xian, "Really a neat child. Clean and tidy. One can see that one has good fortune." Good fortune. Shun Miao only felt flustered in her heart. Consort Dong Shu looked at her with a gentle face, and if one did not know, one would definitely put down the vigilance in one's heart because of her kind attitude. Consort Dong Shu was not favored as there were countless females around Emperor Wen Hui. There were those with background, talents, beauty, and character. Consort Dong Shu, however, was gentle and slow, did not fight for anything, and did not snatch anything. Just based on the word stable, she was able to sit in the position of the four consorts. On the surface, she was the one with the lowest status among the four consorts, but Shun Miao knew that Consort Dong Shu was not a harmless female like her appearance. In the beginning, when Shun Miao married Fu Xiuyi, Consort Dong Shu also praised that good fortune brings prosperity to the husband, but afterwards Fu Xiuyi's wings gradually grew and Consort Dong Shu treated her lukewarmly. When she returned from the Qin country, Consort Dong Shu, who was the Empress Dowager, was on the same side as Mei Foreign. In Consort Dong Shu's eyes, she was also a chess piece that was used to rope in the Shin family and was a vulgar chess piece that could not be seen in public. Later, when Fu Xiuyi abolished the crown prince, Consort Dong Shu was the first to step forward to help Fu Sheng up. She quickly lowered her head to hide the trace of hatred in her eyes. Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu, however, thought that Shin Miao was shy, and Consort Su Xian casually asked, "How old are you this year?" Replying to your ladyship, Shin Miao softly said, "This official's daughter is 14. 14. Consort Su Xian pondered for a while and smiled. "You will be married soon?" This senseless sentence made Luo Shuiyan nervous, as she was most worried about Shin Miao. And a female's marriage was more important to one's entire life. If Shin Miao's marriage was controlled by the people in the palace, Luo Shuiyan's expression was not good. Seeing Luo Shuiyan being so affectionate, Consort Su Xian laughed instead and said, "Shin Foreign is so nervous. Why? Are you afraid that Bin Gong will be a matchmaker for young lady Shin?" Luo Shuiyan hurriedly said, "I dare not." "Do not worry." Consort Su Xian said, "Even if Bin Gong really wants to be a matchmaker, Bin Gong will not randomly choose a couple. I will definitely ask young lady's opinion." Speaking of which, Su Xian Fei looked at Shin Miao and smiled maliciously. "Shin young lady, do you have anyone in mind now?" To ask Consort Dong Shu if Shin Miao had anyone in mind in front of her, everyone knew that Shin Miao was once in love with Fu Xiuyi. This was to embarrass Consort Dong Shu in public. Consort Su Xian had always relied on Emperor Wen Hui's favor to be arrogant and despotic. Among the four consorts, Consort Dong Shu was the easiest to bully, so to be able to use Consort Dong Shu as a raft, Consort Su Xian was never tired of it. "Many thanks to your ladyship's good intentions. This official's daughter does not have anyone in mind now," Shun Miao said as she hung her head. Consort Su Xian seemed to be somewhat bored and felt that Shun Miao had a wooden temperament and was not like the idiot in the rumors, otherwise she could make fun of it. She waved her hands. "Never mind. If there is none, then there is none." Chapter 377. Luo Shuiyan became more cautious. As long as it was related to Shen Miao, she would have to raise 120% of her attention to deal with it. Just as she was thinking, she heard Consort Dong Shu laughing from above. "Foreign need not be nervous. Today us two sisters invite you into the palace. In fact, it is to talk about daily life with Foreign." After a pause, she then continued, "Us two sisters have never been to the northwestern region before, and it is a story that Foreign followed the general into battle. We are very curious about the northern region and came to invite Foreign for a chat." Consort Dong Shu's voice was gentle and intimate, like the spring breeze that soothed one's heart. Luo Shuiyan did not relax, and instead Shan Miao became more suspicious. She obviously knew that there would be other intentions in entering the palace today, and perhaps it was Emperor Wen Hui who was here to inquire about something. Emperor Wen Hui deliberately looked for Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu. Both of them, one was domineering and the other was gentle. With one hard and one soft working together, it was easy to make one confused and involuntarily speak. Shin Miao's heart was somewhat nervous. Many thanks to your ladyship's appreciation. Luo Shuiyan also smiled. It is just that the northern region is boring and one fear that your ladyship will not like it. No harm. Consort Dong Shu smiled. Since we invited you over, one would not be afraid of boredom. Her voice paused as she suddenly thought of something and looked at Shen Miao. Fu Xiui knew that the emperor wanted them to sound out Luo Shuiyan, and also knew that Luo Shuiyan would bring Shen Miao along as a warning. Yesterday he had instructed her that if Shen Miao was present, Shen Miao must be sent away during the discussion. Fu Xiui was Consort Dong Shu's son, so naturally Consort Dong Shu would not doubt, but no matter what, she could not see what was worth guarding against this slightly wooden and timid young lady. Shin Miao's head hung down, and one could not see her expression clearly. One only heard Consort Dong Shu saying, but it would be boring for a young lady to hear such interesting things. Tong Yao, bring fifth Shin young lady to stroll around the garden, and when she is tired, bring her to the living quarters to have some snacks and take good care of her. Even though Consort Su Xian was somewhat surprised, she thought that it was Emperor Wen Hui's idea and it did not affect her, so naturally she did not refute. Luo Shuiyan's heart was uneasy and it was best to place Shen Miao in front of her, but in the current situation, she also realized that the following conversation with the two consorts would not really be idle. At least, in broad daylight, these people did not dare to let anything happen to Shen Miao. Thinking like this, her heart was slightly at ease and she smiled at Shen Miao. Jiao Jiao, follow the female official to stroll around the garden. Mother will come and look for you after speaking to the ladyships. Shin Miao did not refuse, but her heart cried out that it was not good. Why did he send her away without any rhyme or reason? She could act coquettishly and refuse to leave, but that would be too deliberate. Why didn't they let others hear their conversation? Could it be that she had already aroused suspicion? The person who spoke was Consort Dong Shu. It was the first time Consort Dong Shu met her. Could it be that Fu Xiui was reminding Consort Dong Shu? This thought flashed through Shen Miao's mind, but she didn't say anything. She stood up respectfully and said goodbye to concubine Su Xian and followed Tong Yao out. Official Tong Yao led her to the garden. Gardens could be seen everywhere in the imperial palace. They were probably built for the imperial concubines, and they were quite beautiful. It was just that Shen Miao did not have the mood to appreciate it. She was more familiar with every inch of land here than anyone else, and knew clearly which part of the garden was what kind of flowers grew. So how would she have any interest to listen? Official Tong Yao also saw that she was absent-minded and said, if young lady Shen is tired, this servant will bring you to the living quarters to sit. There are snacks there. Shin Miao nodded her head. Just as they walked halfway and saw the doors to the living quarters, a little eunuch ran over and said a few words to Tong Yao's ear in a hurry. Tong Yao then said apologetically to Shen Miao, the living quarters is the house in front. Young lady Shen should go in first. This servant will come over after sending the things over. Shin Miao nodded her head and did not haggle over it. That living quarters was right in front, and there were guards everywhere in the palace, so there was no fear of anything happening. She herself had come here before and was very clear about it. Walking to the front of the living quarters, she opened the door and walked in. That door closed by itself with a pa sound. Shin Miao's heart quivered, and before she could react, a pair of hands covered her mouth from behind. Shin Miao did not even think as she bit down and bent her elbow to fiercely hit her back. She only heard a sigh sound behind her as she sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Her elbow was grabbed by someone, and she was unable to move. A familiar voice sounded with some suppressed anger. Shin Miao, are you a shrew? Shin Miao was slightly surprised, and the person behind her had already released his hand. She turned her head and looked at the other person. Opposite, Xie Jingxing was touching his own hand, and there was a slight anger in his expression. But what Shin Miao cared about was not this. It was different from his previous cynical and unruly romantic appearance. Today he was wearing a dark red official robe with fine cufflinks, long hat, and green boots. His sharp and arrogant appearance was a completely different person from before. Shin Miao had never seen him like this before and was stunned for a moment. Xie Jingxing locked the door and turned his head to look at her with his arms crossed. with an appearance of wanting to settle accounts. But Shen Miao was not afraid of him and only frowned. "What are you doing here?" "Coming out from the palace. One thought that it might be you, and came over to take a look." "It really is." Xie Jingxing said it in an incomparably relaxed manner. "The emperor summoned your father to the palace?" Shen Miao's heart jumped. "What do you mean?" Chapter 378. "What do you mean?" Shen Miao asked. Xie Jingxing would not say such words for no reason, so there must be some other meaning behind it. Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "Shen Yuan is Prince Ding's people." Shen Miao's heart was slightly shocked, but she did not speak. Before Shen Yuan's accident, he had a secret discussion with Prince Ding. Xie Jingxing said, "The Shen family is now like fire and water. So other than dealing with your father, what else could it be?" "Impossible." Shen Miao cried out involuntarily. Xie Jingxing's eyes stared at her as if he wanted to see through Shen Miao and asked, "Why?" Shen Miao's palms were slightly damp, and there was a moment of confusion in her heart. The Shen family's accident was not in these 2 years, and the imperial family would delay dealing with the Shen family for a period of time because there was currently no justification for it. Shen Yuan worked for Prince Ding, and both of them were extremely dependable people and would not take action if there was no absolute certainty. For example, in the last lifetime, she only knew that the second and third household also contributed and Shen Yuan would definitely take out the evidence of rebellion at the end. But what time was it now? It was still too early for the imperial family to deal with Shen Xian, so why would Shen Yuan take action at this time? The evidence at this time should not be complete, and Fu Xiaoyi chose to take action now? How did it become like this? Her expression was uncertain, and when she raised her head, she met with Xie Jingxing's thoughtful gaze. Shen Miao's heart quivered. Xie Jingxing was quick-witted, and one feared that he would be able to find out something from her expression. Thinking of this, she covered up her smile. "Shen Yuan is my second older brother. Why would he harm my father?" Hearing this, Xie Jingxing smiled instead. His smile had a deeper meaning. "Shen Miao, do you think I am a fool? Since little Xie Marquis told me all these," Shen Miao said seriously, "but how does His Highness Prince Ding want to deal with my father?" Xie Jingxing shook his head. Shen Miao did not hold much hope, and even if Xie Jingxing knew, there was no reason for him to tell her. The Xie family had dabbled in the Ming cheese structure, and if one were to carelessly help, one feared that one would get into trouble. Even if she was in Xie Jingxing's position today, she would not even give a reminder. It was just that. Shen Miao sized up Xie Jingxing's official robes and asked in puzzlement, "Why did you enter the palace?" She asked casually but did not know that her confident look made Xie Jingxing pause for a moment. In just a short moment, Xie Jingxing lazily said, "Enter the palace to request for commander." "Invite a commander?" Shen Miao was surprised for a moment and subconsciously asked, "Invite a commander for whom?" Xie Jingxing only smiled and did not speak. Shen Miao suddenly looked at him. "You asked to be the commander? North border. Xiongnu?" This time Xie Jingxing was surprised. "How do you know?" The matter of the Xiongnu in the northern borderlands was a secret. Before the edict was issued, Shen Xian might not even know about it, much less Shen Miao. Xie Jingxing had always been curious about where Shen Miao's eyes and ears came from, and since she even knew about the matters in the palace, he was even more surprised. Shen Miao stared blankly at him, but her heart was like a raging storm. In the northern borderlands, the Xiongnu had not retreated, but the terrain of the northern borderlands was complex, and the people of the northern borderlands were ferocious and ferocious. A few years ago, Emperor Wenhui only fought in small skirmishes and was unwilling to confront them head-on. Afterwards, the Xiongnu became more aggressive, and Emperor Wenhui sent Xie Ding out for an expedition. The Xie family's army was ferocious, but was completely annihilated on the battlefield. At the end of the same year, Xie Ding's corpse was wrapped in horsehide, and the entire country mourned. In the spring of the second year, Xie Jingxing went out for an expedition on behalf of his father and was defeated like a landslide. He received the tragic ending of having his heart pierced by 10,000 arrows, skinned and air-dried before being hung on the city walls. Xie Jingxing died at the age of 22, and now he was only 19. Shen Miao's heart felt suffocated for a moment. It was impossible for the emperor to deal with the Xiongnu at this time, and Xie Jingxing requested to be the commander. Xie should not be aware of the matter at this time, and looking at Xie Jingxing's appearance, he should have obtained the order. Chapter 379. Changed again. Changed again. It was obviously a matter of a few years, but it was advanced. If Xie Jingxing went to war now, would it be the same ending as in the past lifetime? As for the Xie family, Xin Miao wanted to keep them to fight against the imperial power in the future, but no matter how much she changed, would some people's fate still follow the old track? Was this arrogant young man with red lips, white teeth, and beautiful, romantic features finally going to take the worst step? Xie Jingxing saw that Xin Miao's expression was strange and did not find it strange. His eyes slightly flashed and said, "You seem to be very worried?" Xin Miao did not have the mood to analyze such slightly teasing words as her heart was somewhat confused. She looked at him and said, "You lead the Xie family's army? Pay more attention to the Xie family's army, and also pay more attention to the people around you." Xin Miao said word by word. In the beginning, her words were somewhat dry, but towards the end, her expression gradually became serious. The wind and sand of the northern Jiang is strong and the armors of the soldiers are heavy. No matter what, do not take off the breastplate. In the previous lifetime, Xie Jingxing's heart was pierced by thousands of arrows, and perhaps it would be better if he wore the breastplate. More importantly, Xin Miao felt that Xie Jingxing's death was too strange. How could a young general with outstanding battle tactics be defeated so miserably? In addition, she gradually understood the situation and knew that the imperial family had attacked the aristocratic families, so it was not possible that there were no imperial family people in the Xie family's army. And the tragedy of the Xie father and son might not be without the addition of a conspiracy. Xin Miao wholeheartedly thought about the overall situation, but did not know that with her and Xie Jingxing's current friendship, it was not to the point of being friends. Thus these words that were full of concern seemed to be somewhat subtle. Xie Jingxing was also surprised by her, and suddenly smiled as he approached Shen Miao, and slightly bent his head. He was very close to Shen Miao, but his pair of peach blossom eyes were smiling as he teased, "So concerned about me?" Shen Miao was immersed in her own thoughts and did not realize that he was already so close. Chapter 380. Just as Shen Miao was about to speak, she saw Xie Jingxing pressing her waist and said, "Someone is coming." He then smiled at Shen Miao. "Farewell, Shen Jiao Jiao." He turned and flew out of the window of the room. This person walked out of the window as though he was walking through his own front door. Shen Miao was still in a daze when the door was pushed open and Tong Yao walked in. Seeing Shen Miao standing in the middle of the room, she asked curiously, "Why is Shen young lady not sitting?" Shen Miao recovered to her senses and smiled before getting up and walking to one side to sit down. But her heart was still thinking about what Xie Jingxing said just now. Xie Jingxing's commander request was to set off 10 days later. 10 days later. Was it not exactly the same as 3 years later? 3 years later would also be at this time. Xie Jingxing would set off, and then the Xie father and son of the Xie family would forever end in the history of Ming Qi. The Xie family would be heading towards an inevitable ending like in the previous lifetime. What about the Shen family? What would happen to the Shen family? Xie Jingxing gave her a hint before he left, but that was not the ending that she wanted to see. If one were to retreat like this, one would be able to keep one's life, but it was only to keep one's life. Without the protection of power, peaceful days would become a luxury. The path of the previous lifetime made Shen Miao clearly understand one point. Only by standing in a higher position than the enemy would one be able to truly control one's fate. However, Xie Jingxing's method was more than enough to defend, but not enough to attack. What method should be used to break it? In the next few hours, Shen Miao kept thinking about this problem. The snacks on the table were not touched at all. The tea was not even drunk, and she did not have the mood to look at those books. This made female official Tong Yao look at her frequently, not knowing how a young lady like Shen Miao could sit for an entire afternoon like an old man. Even those slow-tempered imperial concubines in the palace did not have this kind of patience. One did not know how long they waited until a little eunuch came to invite them. Female official Tong Yao then brought Shen Miao out, and Luo Shuiyan was waiting for her at the door. When she saw Shen Miao, she barely squeezed out a smile and pulled Shen Miao out of the palace to return to the residence. Even though Luo Shuiyin tried her best to act as if nothing had happened, what kind of person was Shen Miao? She had long learnt to observe one's words and body language in the inner palace and could see Luo Shuiyin's worries. She said, "Mother, what did they say to you?" Luo Shuiyin smiled. "Nothing much, just some matters of living in the Shaochun city. He probably hasn't been to the northwest before and wants to see for himself." Shen Miao asked, "Is it really like this? But if that's the case, why did he specially call Mother into the palace to talk for so long? Isn't that too strange?" Luo Shuiyin touched Shen Miao's head. "What is strange about this? The imperial concubines in the palace can't move around, so their days are a bit boring. Mother will talk to them about distant matters to relieve their boredom. They will also be a bit happier." Even so, Luo Shuiyin was still somewhat worried. Although she did not participate in court affairs, it did not mean that she was ignorant of the dangers of the court. Today, she dealt with it carefully, but it was precisely because she talked with the two concubines about daily life that she was even more puzzled. There were no fools in the palace. Everyone was smart. But in today's conversation, it did not involve military affairs at all and did not even mention the Shen family army. Instead, he only talked about the commoners of the Shaochun city, which made Luo Shuiyin puzzled. Those who fought had an intuition for danger. She obviously felt that danger was approaching, but did not know where the problem was. Luo Shuiyin felt somewhat depressed, but she was afraid of scaring Shen Miao and did not intend to talk about these matters with Shen Miao. Shen Miao also did not ask her again. When they returned to the residence, the sky was already nearing evening. Shen Xiao and Shen Xian had been waiting at the residence's doors, and upon seeing both of them return, they were relieved. Chapter 381. After the meal, Luo Shuiyin instructed Shen Miao to rest early before pulling Shen Xiao and Shen Xian back to the room to discuss the matter of entering the palace today. Shen Miao did not follow. She had already heard a lot of things from Luo Shuiyin's mouth, but what she could not understand was what did Shen Yuan give to Fu Xiuyi. The oil lamp shone brightly in her eyes as Shen Miao sat at the table deep in thought. Jingzhe and Guyu were careful not to disturb her. Outside the window, it started to drizzle. This was the first drizzle since the end of the year, indicating the arrival of spring. Spring was about to arrive, and all living things were revived. It was obviously a new hope, but how could one walk out of the dark willows and bright flowers in the heavy ice and snow? Shen Miao closed her eyes. This night, there were also people in embroidered clothes walking in the night. When Xie Jingxing passed by the courtyard, he coincidentally met Xie Changwu and Xie Changchao. When both of them saw him, they immediately stopped and respectfully greeted him, "Eldest brother." Towards these two people, Xie Jingxing had always turned a blind eye to them, and it was the same today. When he lifted his feet and was about to leave, he was stopped by Xie Changchao. Xie Changchao was somewhat pleased with himself. "Long time no see, eldest brother. One do not know what eldest brother is busy with. A few days ago there was a hunt, and one wanted to go with eldest brother, but father made us follow to Lu Daren's official banquet. Thus one could only regret not going." These days Xieding had been bringing Xie Changwu and Xie Changchao to his colleagues' banquets because everyone knew that Xieding wanted to bring his two sons into an official career. Speaking of which, Xie Changwu and Xie Changchao were Shu sons and their qualifications were not as good as Xie Jingxing's. If it was not for Xie Jingxing being frivolous and unwilling to enter officialdom, everyone knew that it would not be their turn. But because of Princess Yuqing, Xie Jingxing and Xieding were in discord for many years, and the relationship between the father and son was like ice. How could it be repaired? Xie Changwu was more modest than Xie Changchao, but even so, his eyes could not hide the contentment. He said, "Eldest brother should also follow along. Eldest brother is proficient in both the pen and the sword, and would definitely gain the favor of all the Daren. At that time, it would be much easier to enter officialdom." Xie Changchao and Xie Changwu had already understood Xie Jingxing's temperament and knew that Xie Jingxing was naturally arrogant. The more he said so, the more impossible it was for him to enter officialdom. In terms of obtaining Xieding's favor, they were destined to be inferior to Xie Jingxing. In terms of literary and military strategy, and even in terms of appearance, they were far inferior to Xie Jingxing. Now that they finally had a chance to suppress Xie Jingxing, Naturally, they could not wait to be cocky. When Xie Jingxing heard it, he looked at them with a smile that was not a smile and suddenly asked, "Very proud?" Xie Changchao and Xie Changwu were surprised, but Xie Jingxing had already left. The disdain in the corners of his eyes fell into the eyes of the two of them. Looking at Xie Jingxing's fading figure, Xie Changchao said hatefully, "What plaything? Who does he think he is?" Xie Changwu's expression was sinister. "There will be a day when I will trample him under my feet." When Xie Jingxing returned to the room, there were already two people waiting. One of them was a middle-aged man with a full beard, while the other was a young man with a straight face. The bearded middle-aged man asked, "Master, you really want to?" Xie Jingxing sat down in front of the table and waved his hands. Xie Changchao and Xie Changwu, the younger one, said, "Why not?" At the end of the words, there was a hint of killing intent. "No need. If we take action now, there will be complications." Xie Jingxing interrupted his words. "Without me, Xie Changwu and Xie Changchao would not do anything to Xie Ding. As for Madame Fong," he sneered, "keep her." Both of them bowed their heads in agreement. Xie Jingxing took out a booklet from his sleeve. That was the copy of the commander request that was presented today. Chapter 382. In the end, he still had to make this move. The first ray of sunlight shone through the carved window onto the table. Xin Miao sat in front of the table without moving. Jingzhe carried a silver basin in and jumped in shock upon entering. "Why is young lady up so early today?" Xin Miao did not speak as Jingzhe walked over. The oil lamp in front of the table had already burned out, and on Xin Miao's fair face, there was a faint greenish black under her eyes. Jingzhe was surprised for a moment and exclaimed, "Could it be that young lady did not sleep for the entire night?" Xin Miao shook her head and pressed her forehead tiredly. She sat there for the whole night. Xie Jingxing's hint made her puzzled and confused. She did not know what Shen Yuan gave to Fu Xiuyi and only knew that it must be bad news for the Shen family. And the word retreat was a move that she did not want the Shen family to make. How should he get out of this predicament? Jingzhe spoke with some heartache. "No matter how worried young lady is, one should not torment one's body like this. Master and Madam will be heartbroken if they see this. Young lady, you should eat something first and rest. You don't look well. What if young lady falls down first?" Xin Miao also felt that her stomach was rumbling, and after thinking for an entire night, her head was somewhat dizzy, so she said, "Bring some porridge over. I will sleep for a while after eating. Do not mention this matter to others." Jingzhe made an AI sound before turning and jogging out, treating it as going to the kitchen to bring Xian Miao's breakfast. Xin Miao stood up and wanted to use hot water to wash her face. Just as she was washing halfway, she suddenly heard footsteps outside the door and Jingzhe ran back. So fast, Xin Miao was a little surprised. There was still a distance from the small kitchen to here, and even if Jingzhe ran over, she would still need to wait for a while. "Miss, something bad has happened." Jingzhe was somewhat flustered as she said, "Someone from the palace has arrived. Summon master, foreign and eldest young master to the palace immediately." The handkerchief in Xin Miao's hands fell into the basin. She calmed herself down and said, "I'll go take a look." In the courtyard, the eunuch from the palace had received Emperor Wan Hui's orders and was talking to Shan Xian. These people would usually be more polite when they saw the formidable general, but today, his attitude was not very clear. Sometimes, the attitude of the master could be seen from the attitude of the messenger. Obviously, this trip to the palace was not a good thing. When Xin Miao came out, not only Shan Xian, Luo Shuiyin, and Xin Xiu were in the courtyard, the people from the other households also came out. Even old Shun Foreign brought Shun Yuanbo out. It was just that looking at this look, old Shun Foreign did not show any concern and instead looked on coldly, as if she was afraid of drawing fire onto herself and avoided it. On the other hand, Shunwan asked the eunuch, "May I ask why His Majesty summoned Big Brother to the palace?" The eunuch looked up at the sky. "I am only acting on His Majesty's orders. I do not know His Majesty's intentions. Darren, quickly follow me into the palace." He urged Shan Xian to leave quickly. When Shin Xiu saw Shin Miao walking over, he was somewhat nervous and quickly pulled Shin Miao's hand. "Younger sister, why did you come over?" Seeing Shin Miao looking over, He quickly comforted her. "Younger sister, do not worry. His Majesty only summoned us to the palace to discuss some military matters, and we'll be back soon. When he returns, eldest brother will bring you to eat tonghulu." He was afraid of scaring Shen Miao, but did not know that in Shen Miao's eyes, this look was even more suspicious. To summon Shen Xian, Luo Shuiyin, and Shen Xiu to the palace, even though she was not brought along, upon careful thought, the people brought along were the leading figures of the Shen family's army. So this matter was definitely related to the Shen family's army. Now that it was the Shen family's military power, it was a hot potato, and once it involved military power, one must be careful of everything. Chapter 383. At this time, if Shen Miao continued to show fear, not only would she not be able to help, it would instead burden Luo Shuiyin and the rest. Thus Shen Miao smiled. Really? Eldest brother must keep to his words. Seeing Shen Miao like this, Shen Xiu then let out a sigh of relief. Shen Xiu knew that Shen Miao was intelligent, but did not want Shen Miao to be involved with the matters of the court. Moreover, in the court matters, it was never a person's worth, as there would be deaths and injuries at every turn and countless people would be involved. So how would it be easy to explain? Luo Shuiyin and Shen Xian also comforted Shen Miao. "Jiao Jiao, just stay in the residence and do not go anywhere. Wait for father and mother to return. Then we will go together to make new clothes for Jiao Jiao for the beginning of spring." Shen Miao also complied. She watched helplessly as the eunuch brought Shen Xian, an entourage, out of the residence. Chen Roadshow pulled Shen Wan's hands and said worriedly, "Why would eldest brother and eldest Saw suddenly enter the palace? Did something happen?" Shen Wan shook his head. Shen Gui said, "Eldest brother is already in the limelight and does not know how to conduct himself in court. One feared that if something really happened, there would not be anyone to speak to." These words were somewhat meaningful. Shen Gui's meaning was that if something really happened to Shen Xian, the two brothers Shen Gui and Shen Wan would not send charcoal in the snow. Shen Miao sneered in her heart. She only heard Shen Yu timidly saying, "If something happened to eldest Bo, it should be a very big matter. Will it implicate us by bringing them all away?" "How would it implicate Yuer?" Shen Gui smiled. "If it implicates Yuer, the first to bear the brunt should be little Five." Shen Gui's words were vicious. After the successive loss of his sons, Shen Gui's career was not smooth. He was originally jealous that Shen Xian's position was higher than his and his prestige was higher than his. Now that he saw Shen Xian's misfortune, naturally he was overjoyed and even hoped that Shen Xian's branch would be wiped out so that there would no longer be any obstacles in front of him. A trace of schadenfreude flashed in Shen Yu's eyes as she looked sympathetically at Shen Miao. "Isn't fifth younger sister very pitiful?" Shen Miao did not get angry but smiled instead and said lightly, "The servants in the palace do not know His Majesty's intention, so it seems that both Shu Shu have already understood His Majesty's intention." She looked at Shen Gui. Since second uncle is able to predict things like a deity, when this matter reaches the ears of His Majesty will appreciate second uncle's ability to understand others. It's rare to see someone like second uncle who can understand others. His Majesty can even be compared to the previous dynasty's official Wei. As these words came out, Shen Wan and Shen Gui's expressions changed slightly. What was the greatest taboo for an emperor? It was for his officials to randomly guess the emperor's intentions. Shen Miao's words were not to say that Shen Gui was very clear about Emperor Wen Hui's thoughts. So what was he planning? She even used official Wei from the previous dynasty to insinuate that official Wei was the emperor's trusted aide. Often, the emperor only needed a glance to know what the emperor wanted to do. When the emperor's position was unstable, he had worked together with official Wei to control many of the opposing ministers. But in the end, when the emperor was in power, he had given official Wei a death warrant. No monarch would like an official who could clearly understand one's thoughts. If one understood too clearly, there would be no reverence, and if there was no reverence, perhaps one day a knife would be placed on one's neck. This was the imperial family, the most suspicious. One sentence could decide a person's life and death. Shen Miao's words made Shen Gui's and Shen Wan's expressions change, but they dared not refute it. They were afraid that if these words were to be spread out and heard by Emperor Wen Hui, one did not know how much trouble it would bring to themselves. Both of them were secretly shocked as they did not know where did Shan Miao learn the ability to pin such a big hat onto others with just one sentence. In the past, it was Mei Forin's usual tactic. At this moment, Shin Miao was also forced by Shin Gui's unrestrained mouth and did not really want to fight with him here. The most urgent matter was to think of how to solve this matter. Old Shun Forin had seen enough of the show and was not willing to let her son fall into a disadvantageous position, so she coldly snorted, "Will only bring trouble to the Shin family." She was still thinking about the matter of Shin Xian wanting to separate from the family, but once this matter came out, the matter of the separation would be delayed. Old Shin Forin even thought that if something happened to Shin Xian, they would not be implicated, and it would only be the first household that would be implicated. Would not the first household's assets all belong to her? Thinking of this, her eyes revealed a look of greed. Shin Miao's heart was filled with disgust. This room of people had fully acted out what was called throwing stones at a person who was down. The Shin family was definitely on the list of despicable people in the world. Wan Yinyang pulled Shun Dongling's hand and hid at the back. She dared not say anything in this kind of situation. Even though Ren Wanyun was awake, she did not leave Kai Yun Yuan and did not appear today. Shin Dongling said softly, "But what would happen to Eldest Bo? Eldest Bo is not in the Ding capital all year round. Could it be that there would be other rewards because of the previous victory?" Shin Dongling's words were most likely to ease the atmosphere. Shin Yu was somewhat displeased with her words, and old Shin Forin also revealed an unhappy expression, but only Shin Miao was slightly surprised. Not in the Ding capital all year round? Yes, Shin Xian and wife and Shun Xiao had been fighting all year round in the bitter cold northwestern region and had just returned to the Ding capital. It was impossible to use the excuse of being in the Ding capital as an excuse. And yesterday Consort Su Xian and Consort Dong Shu were asking about the days in the Shaochun city. What was the use of asking about the days in the Shaochun city for? Shin Miao did not believe that the delicate females in the palace would be interested in the remote northwestern region. There must be a connection. Not in the Ding capital. What kind of crime would it be? Chapter 384. Shin Miao's mind was unsettled and no longer stood here entangled with the Shin family. She did not even turn her head back and quickly walked back to her own room. Outside, Shin Gui and entourage had seen enough of the excitement and wanted to inquire about the matter, thus they dispersed in twos and threes. Shin Yu followed behind Shin Rochio, and there was a trace of joy on her face. Yesterday she heard that it was Consort Dong Shu who saw Shin Miao and Luo Shuiyan. Shin Yu's heart was very uneasy. Consort Dong Shu was after all Prince Ding's consort mother, and if Consort Dong Shu had eyes on her, what would happen if she randomly pulled strings? Fortunately today, it seemed that the first household was unlucky. Thinking of this, Shun Yu's footsteps became relaxed. It was Shen Dongling who was being held by Wan Yinyang, who looked at the courtyard thoughtfully before following back. The huge western courtyard became empty in a blink of an eye. Even Ah Qi followed Shin Xian's guards back to the Shin family's army. Emperor Wen Hui suddenly summoned people into the palace, and naturally the Shin family's army was imprisoned. Fortunately, Imo Qing was still around because Imo Qing was not in the Shin family's army yet. In the room, Jingzhe, Gu Yu, Bai Lu, and Shuangjiang were standing behind Shin Miao. Imo Qing stood by the door with his head hung down, and a trace of solemnity appeared on his face. Even though Shin Dongling said that perhaps Emperor Wen Hui would continue to reward Shan Xian, everyone knew that it was impossible. Shin Miao sat at the table with her brows tightly knitted, which made Imo Qing's heart slightly comforted. He was initially worried that Shin Miao would be at a loss of what to do after hearing the news, but now even though Shin Miao's face was solemn, she was not nervous at all. Shin Miao looked at the notes in front of her. The Shin family was then exterminated by Fu Xiu-yi in one fell swoop. At that time, she had tried to stop it, but it was Fu Xiu-yi who, in front of all the civil and military officials, listed out the Shun family's crimes one by one until she was speechless. Even though one knew that it was all fake, but these fake evidence were so conclusive that it made one powerless to refute. That day in the throne room, the scenes of the past were like knives and chisels that were carved into her heart. That denouncing the Shun family was according to the length of time, day by day. Now it was the 69th year of the Ming Qi, and she was reborn in the 68th year of the Ming Qi. In the things that Shen Yuan presented to Fu Xiu-yi, the criminal evidence must be something that happened in the 68th year of the Ming Qi or before. In the 68th year of Ming Qi, what crimes did the Shen family commit? Xin Miao closed her eyes and some scenes flashed through her mind. She was wearing the Empress court dress, and the phoenix hairpins on her head could not hide the embarrassment around her. The civil and military officials were agitated. Pei Lang was indifferent and Fu Xiu-yi angrily threw the booklet at her face. A civil official was reading. In the 68th year of Ming Qi, the Shen family's officers and soldiers disobeyed the emperor's order and released the bandits, deceiving the monarch. Releasing the bandits without permission was deceiving the emperor. Xin Miao suddenly opened her eyes. She suddenly remembered that in the 68th year of Ming Qi, there was indeed not a small matter that happened. Shen Xian went against the Shirong and defeated them, seizing 3 cities. Emperor Wen Hui ordered that everyone in the cities be killed without mercy. To a general, massacring a city was the cruelest achievement. And in the Shirong city, other than the soldiers, most of the people were the elderly, the weak, women, and children. These old and weak women and children were like the common people of Ming Qi, safe and sound, and the ones at fault were the Shirong soldiers. Shen Xian was not a person who liked to kill, thus in private, he left the lives of those women and children. Other than the Shen family's army, no one else knew about this matter, and the people of the Shen family's army were brought up by Shen Xian. So it was impossible for them to betray Shen Xian. In this, there should be Shen Yuan's credit. Perhaps a long time ago, Shen Yuan had buried a hidden chess piece in the Shen family's army. It was just that after the crown prince was deposed, the entire Shen family's crimes were pursued one by one, and this crime of deceiving the monarch was not that important. However, in the hands of Fu Xiu-yi, who had always been steady, to take it out at this time when the time was not ripe, it could only mean that the current situation made Fu Xiu-yi feel a crisis, and the Shen family had become a variable. In this lifetime, because there was no entanglement between her and Fu Xiu-yi did not stop Emperor Wen Hui to let the Shen family stay for a few more years, and the imperial family finally had their eyes on the Shen family, this fat meat. Chapter 385. So the evidence that Shen Yuan handed over to Fu Xiu-yi should be the crime of Shen Xian not acting according to Emperor Wen Hui's order to massacre the city. This matter could be said to be big or small. It was just that in the current situation, the imperial family was bent on taking back the Shen family's military power. So how would they let go of this opportunity? Things had become extremely tricky. Xin Miao clenched her fists and slowly calmed her emotions. Now it was not the worst time yet. Even though the imperial family wanted to deal with the Shen family, they only wanted to recover the military power. To move against the Shen family at this time, it would inevitably cause dissatisfaction from the other aristocratic families. The Fu family was cunning and would not do that. What should be done at this time? The few people in the room looked at Shen Miao's changing expression and were puzzled in their hearts. But they saw Shen Miao suddenly standing up. She said, "I want to go out of the residence for a while." Gu Yu was surprised for a moment. Young lady, to leave the residence at this time would attract gossip. Something happened in the family and one's heart is depressed. How about finding a friend to relieve it? Shen Miao's eyes turned cold. Go. Emoqing naturally had no objection to Shen Miao's decision. Moreover, in his heart, he was convinced by Shen Miao and knew that Shen Miao had her own way of doing things. At this moment, seeing Shen Miao like this, his heart calmed down a little and said, "This subordinate will go and arrange." Seeing Emoqing like this, Jingjia and Gu Yu did not speak anymore and let Bai Lu and Shuangjiang stay in the residence to wait for news while they went out with Shen Miao. Shen Miao's actions naturally caused the people in the residence to be surprised, and when someone came to probe, she only said that she was going to look for Feng and Ning. Feng and Ning and Shen Miao were considered as friends, so it was natural for Shen Miao to look for Feng and Ning to complain about the first household of the Shen family. Thus, no one stopped him. After leaving the residence, Emoqing drove the carriage towards the Feng residence. After driving past the small alley and confirming that no one was following, Shen Miao then said, "Go to the Su residence." Su residence? Gu Yu was surprised for a moment. Which Su residence? Ping Nan Count Su family, Su Yu residence. Emoqing, who was outside, was very familiar with the roads in the Ding capital and was even more clear about which noble residences were located. He did not need to ask for directions and turned the horse around to head in another direction. Jingjia and Guyu wanted to ask but did not dare to. It was true that Xin Miao had an idea, but even they, as servants, knew that in the Xin family's court, the Xie family was one of the political enemies, and the Marquis of Lin and Xie family and the Count of Pingnan's Su family were grasshoppers on the same boat. Naturally, the Su family and the Xin family were like fire and water. Now that the Xin family was in trouble, why would they help their sworn enemy? But he probably wasn't asking for help, Jingjia and Guyu anxiously thought. In the residence of the Count of Pingnan, there was still one person sitting in Su Mingfeng's room. That person's purple gold robe was overflowing with color, and there was a casual and lazy smile on his face. On the contrary, it was Su Mingfeng who had an anxious face. What is going on? Why did you ask to be the commander? The Ding capital is too boring. Go to the northern Jiang to play. Xie Jingxing said. Play? Su Mingfeng looked at him and anger appeared on his usually cultured and refined face. Do you know what kind of place the northern Jiang is? Currently no one dares to confront the Xiongnu. So why are you going to join in the fun? Seeing that Xie Jingxing did not take his words to heart, Su Mingfeng slowed down his tone. I know that your heart is not happy that your father brought Xie Changchao and Xie Changwu into officialdom, but there is no need to use this method to vent. This matter is not a small matter and is not a child's play. Even though you are highly skilled in martial arts, the northern Jiang's terrain is complex and you have never been there before. Jingxing, you cannot go. Su Mingfeng. Xie Jingxing laughed. His Majesty had already given me the commander request. Do you think that I can still not go? Su Mingfeng was surprised for a moment, and a look of despair appeared on his face. The emperor's words were like gold and jade, so there was no reason to go back on it. With the commander request in his hands, there was no leeway at this time. Even if Xie Jingxing changed his mind, he would still have to go. Chapter 386. Seeing Su Mingfeng like this, Xie Jingxing said, Are you cursing me to have an accident, or curse me to have an accident? Bastard! Su Mingfeng scolded and was somewhat angry. Why did you not discuss this matter with me? What's the point of discussing it with you? Xie Jingxing took the teapot at the side and poured some tea for himself to drink. It is not bad for me. You. Su Mingfeng was angry but helpless at the same time. She knew that Xie Jingxing had a lawless temperament, and once he decided on something, even 9 bulls would not be able to pull him back. It was said that they were childhood friends, but now it seemed that it was as if his head was hot. Xie Jingxing did not tell him anything, and even if he did, it was only a notice. For example, right now, he was just here to inform him that he had obtained the commander's token. Once the time was up, he would set off. Why do you want to go to the northern Jiang? Su Mingfeng paced back and forth in the room. Do you not want to live anymore? Do you know that if you win, it'll be great, but if you lose? Your 2 Shu younger brothers would be the first to clap their hands. Su Mingfeng suddenly clapped his hands and stood in front of Xie Jingxing. You are assured to leave them in the Ding capital? You are not afraid of what your father would say. Speaking till here, she suddenly paused and looked at Xie Jingxing. Does your father know about this matter? Xie Jingxing shook his head. Look, Su Mingfeng said, you are so willful and Marquis Xie would definitely be furious when he knows about it. At that time, your 2 Shu younger brothers would stir up some gossip, and there is still a hidden yin yang in the residence. When you return from the northern Jiang, who knows what would happen to the residents? Xie Jingxing, are you really assured? Su Mingfeng treated Xie Jingxing as a real friend, and his words were all for Xie Jingxing's sake. Xie Jingxing smiled and looked as if he did not want to talk about it anymore. When I leave the capital, help me look after the princess residence. In the Ding capital, other than the Su family, Xie Jingxing had the most interactions with Princess Rong Xian of the princess residence. Going to the northern borderline now would take at least a year and a half, but at worst, he did not know when he would be able to return. If Princess Rong Xian knew about it, she would definitely be sentimental. Su Mingfeng wanted to scold Xie Jingxing a few more words, but seeing that Xie Jingxing's expression sank, it was not good to say anything more. One heard Xie Jingxing said again, Within these 2 years, it is best for the Su family to avoid the spotlight. You do not enter officialdom and just pretend to be ill. Huh. Su Mingfeng felt strange. What does this have to do with me? Didn't you say that as long as I become an official and don't meddle in military affairs, it would be fine? Just do what I tell you to do. Xie Jingxing glanced at him and stood up. I am leaving? Hey, Su Mingfeng said. You are leaving just like this? What are you doing here today? Goodbye. Xie Jingxing shrugged his shoulders, but suddenly heard a putong sound at the door. Su Mingfeng jumped in shock when he opened the door and a round dumpling rolled in. The dumpling was round and chubby. Su Mingfeng helped him up and patted the dust on Tuanzi's clothes before saying, Minglang, why did you come over? The chubby dumpling was not anyone else but the second young master of the Su family, Su Minglang. He saw that there was someone else in the room, and this person was Xie Jingxing. He first shrunk back in fright before hiding behind Su Mingfeng's back and pulled the corner of Su Mingfeng's clothes. Eldest brother, older sister of the Shen family is here. What? Su Mingfeng did not understand what was going on and saw his substitute servant running over at the door, panting, Young master, there is a young lady looking for you at the residence's entrance. When the words were said, Su Mingfeng was surprised for a moment before looking at Xie Jingxing. Xie Jingxing looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. Su Mingfeng coughed lightly. Nonsense. How would I know any young lady? Chapter 387. It is true. That servant hurriedly said. It is said that it is the 5th young lady of the formidable great general's residence, and is looking for you to discuss something. 5th young lady of the formidable great general's residence. Su Mingfeng was still sorting out this tongue twister when Su Minglang at the side had already jumped up. It is older sister Shen Miao. Eldest brother, older sister Shen Miao is looking for you. Shen Miao? Su Mingfeng was stunned for a moment, and Xie Jingxing frowned. Not to mention the Shen and Xie family, they had no dealings with the Su family. As for privately, Su Mingfeng and Shen Miao did not have any friendship. Shen Miao suddenly came to the door and Su Mingfeng was also confused. He asked Xie Jingxing, could it be that she is here to look for you? Older sister Shen Miao is definitely here to look for me. Su Minglang happily held his face. Eldest brother, let us go and see older sister Shen Miao. This? Su Mingfeng hesitated. Go. Xie Jingxing suddenly opened his mouth, and his gaze seemed to have a deeper meaning. Just in your room. When Shen Miao brought Mo Qing into Su Mingfeng's room, she just happened to see Su Mingfeng's servant bringing Su Minglang out. The snow-white glutinous rice dumpling struggled to fiddle with it, but it was futile at the end. When he saw her, his eyes lit up and he excitedly waved his short hands. Older sister Shen. Shen Miao stopped by his side and revealed a rare smile as she touched his head. Why are you here? Eldest brother did not let me in. Su Minglang put on a long face. Older sister Shen, are you here to see me? The servant at the side coughed lightly and smiled apologetically at Shen Miao. Sorry, young lady Shen, young master is waiting for you inside. This was to cover up Su Minglang's words. Su Minglang was obviously very dissatisfied as he looked at Shen Miao. Shen Miao smiled. I am here to look for your eldest brother to discuss some matters. Next time I will come to see you. I will bring you some sweet cakes to eat. Hearing that, Su Minglang immediately became happy and no longer struggled. He carefully instructed Shen Miao not to forget the agreement before leaving happily with the servant. Mo Qing, who was following behind, was somewhat surprised. Shen Miao was not a patient and kind person to strangers, and just now she treated Su Minglang with a good temper. If one did not know, one would think that Su Minglang was her son. Just as this strange conjecture appeared, it was suppressed by Mo Qing. Not to mention that the age difference between Shen Miao and Su Minglang was not that big. Moreover, Shen Miao was a young lady now, so how would there be a mother? Shen Miao pushed the door open and walked in. In the room, there was only Su Mingfeng sitting alone in front of a small table. Seeing Shen Miao entering and even bringing along Mo Qing, he was first startled but did not stop her and allowed her to enter the room. The servant hurriedly closed the door. Mo Qing stood in front of the door and did not move, in case there were any accidents. Shin Miao walked straight to the opposite of Su Mingfeng and sat down. When she did all these, her entire person seemed incomparably natural. If it was in her own residence, of course there would be no problem. But this was her first time coming to the residence, and before this, she did not even have any interaction with Su Mingfeng. To be so calm in the face of a stranger, Su Mingfeng could not help but cast sidelong glances. Shin Miao was also sizing Su Mingfeng up. In all fairness, Su Mingfeng was a handsome youth. It was just that standing in front of Xie Jingxing, who was like a scorching sun, the brilliance was more or less overshadowed. In fact, Shin Miao knew that Su Mingfeng was not an ordinary son of an official and had some abilities. It was a pity that at the end the Su family was completely destroyed because of the matter of selling soldiers and horses. Su Mingfeng also lost his life in that disaster, and at the end the Su father and son's corpses were personally collected by Xie Jingxing. The relationship between the Su family and the Xie family could be seen. Chapter 388. It was because of this that the Su family and the Shin family did not have much contact. Su Mingfeng felt somewhat uncomfortable being probed by Shin Miao's gaze and lightly coughed. Shin young lady, one do not know the reason for coming to the residence? My father, mother, and eldest brother were summoned to the palace by His Majesty. Does young Master Su know why? Shin Miao asked. Su Mingfeng was somewhat inexplicable. The matter of the Shin family had spread throughout the entire Ding capital early in the morning, and all the officials felt insecure. After all, as an official in court, once there was a little bit of trouble, it would be a huge matter. But what did the Shun family's mishap have to do with his Su family? I do not know, Su Mingfeng answered. He really did not know what was the reason why Shin Xian was summoned to the palace. Everyone guessed that it was Emperor Wen Hui who wanted to punish the Shin family, but no one knew what the charges were. When my father was in the northwest region destroying the Shirong, His Majesty ordered a massacre, but my father did not comply. Shun Miao said, so one think that His Majesty will punish my father for deceiving the monarch and disobeying military orders. Su Mingfeng jumped in shock. It was not because of the charges that Shin Miao said, but because Shin Miao told him about it so easily. This matter could be considered as a handle in anyone's hands, and it was too late to cover it up, but Shin Miao actually told him so bluntly. Even though Su Mingfeng was intelligent since young, he did not know how to continue and could only laugh dryly twice before saying perfunctorily, then what can be done? So I want to ask Heir Su for help. Shin Miao said. Su Mingfeng was once again stunned. He thought about it and could not think of what kind of friendship did he have with Shin Miao, or what kind of friendship did the Shun and Su family had that was worth the Su family lending a helping hand. In a situation where he could not figure it out, Su Mingfeng secretly glanced at the folding screen. Shun young lady is joking. He quickly retracted his gaze and looked at Shun Miao before smiling politely. It is just that what help can this one offer? Most likely Shun young lady has overestimated this one. Moreover, forgive this one for speaking rudely. This matter is complicated, and if one were to randomly help, one fear that one would invite trouble to oneself. One really cannot find a reason to bear the danger and be a good person. Su Mingfeng's words were said in a polite manner, but mercilessly rejected Shan Miao's request. Su Mingfeng also saw it clearly that the Shin Miao in front of him had a straightforward temperament. He simply abandoned his usual roundabout ways and straightforwardly stated, no. Hearing this, Shin Miao gently smiled. When she smiled, her pair of eyes were very clear, and there seemed to be some naivety. However, in the blink of an eye, her smile turned cold. She said, Prince Su, although you are not an official, your father seems to be in charge of the military horses. Su Mingfeng slightly frowned and said, correct? Did your father tell Heir that there seems to be a problem with the military horses? Shin Miao said. This time Su Mingfeng's brows wrinkled even tighter as he stared at Shin Miao. What does Shin young lady mean by this? Shin Miao smiled gently. I heard that there are some small problems with the military horses recently, and a few of the military horses are sick. Medicine is ineffective? Su Mingfeng tightened his grip on the teacup. Shin Miao's words were not false. These days Su Yu was extremely busy with this matter, and other than a few subordinates in the military horses, and Su Yu who secretly told him about it, No one else knew about it. But it was impossible for the people and the military horses to tell Shen Miao. If it were to spread, Emperor Wen Hui would punish them, and everyone would not be able to bear the consequences, and it would be even worse. But how did Shen Miao know about it? Su Mingfeng heard his own dry voice. Shen young lady, where did you hear these false words from? Chapter 389. Untruthful Words? Shen Miao sighed, but there seemed to be a slight smile in her eyes. She got close to Su Mingfeng and whispered, could it be that Heir Su is not afraid that this horse disease will eventually become a horse plague? Su Mingfeng's pupils suddenly widened. Horse plague. With the Count of Ping Nan's cautious temperament, and having dealt with military horses for a lifetime, it is impossible for him not to suspect this. Shen Miao pretended to be surprised. Why? Was it not told to Heir Su? Su Mingfeng gritted his teeth and did not speak. Su Yu did not tell him? Naturally, Su Yu had told him that the horse disease that no medicine could cure was a precursor to the horse plague. A military horse needed a lot of money to feed, and once the horse plague broke out, the military horses would suffer heavy casualties. Not only was there a loss of money on the battlefield, without sufficient military horses, the army would not be able to fight at all. If the blame came down from the top, a light punishment would be losing one's black hat, and a heavy punishment would be losing one's head. It was just that this horse disease came in a strange and tricky manner. Many veterinarians were found, but there was no solution. Recently, they had no choice but to separate the sick horses, but there were still horses dying intermittently. If at the end it was uncontrollable, and it really became a horse plague, one feared that it would be a big disaster. Shun young lady, what is your opinion? Su Mingfeng said bitterly, but as he spoke, he glanced at the screen without revealing anything. At this moment Shen Miao was not anxious. She grabbed an empty teacup on the table and poured a cup of tea for herself before taking a sip. When Su Mingfeng saw it, he wanted to say something, but after thinking about it, he swallowed it down and pretended to be listening attentively. I have a way to solve your horses, Shen Miao said. Su Mingfeng was surprised for a moment. Is this true? Fortunately, a veterinarian with superior skills, and heard that he had solved the same horse disease. Once he is found, the death of the military horses can be easily solved. Su Mingfeng did not speak. Shen Miao picked up the teacup and took another sip before lightly saying, it is not too late to mend the pen after the sheep is lost. Heir Su, when the horse disease spreads and cannot be concealed, it would not only be the horses that suffer. Su Mingfeng gritted his teeth and looked at Shen Miao. Shen young lady specially sent a good strategy today. One fear that there is something else to say. His eyes flashed. Or perhaps you think that my Su family has a good plan to help the Shen family. Please tell me. Straightforward, Shen Miao praised. Su Mingfeng smiled bitterly. How was it that he was refreshed? It was obviously Shen Miao who was cunning. Previously he had said that the Su family had no obligation to wade into these muddy waters to help Shen Xian. So Shen Miao directly stated the terms of the transaction. It had to be said that Shen Miao was a person who knew how to grasp people's weaknesses. She took the matter of the military horses that the Su family was most worried about. This matter had not been spread, and even he and Su Yu spoke about it in private, so he did not know how Shen Miao knew about it. No matter what, he couldn't refuse such a condition. It was no wonder that Shen Miao did not please him and spoke so directly. She simply had a trump card in her hands. A deal was a deal. No one could take advantage of the other. I know that Count Pingnan knows many people in the imperial court. Compared to my parents who are always in the northwest, Count Pingnan's influence is much wider. I would like to ask Count Pingnan's help to gather all the friends and help my father to submit a memorial. Submit a memorial? Su Mingfeng's brows wrinkled. All to plead for General Shen? Shen Miao shook her head. No, all blame my father. Su Mingfeng was stunned. One think that Count Pingnan would not be willing to wade into these muddy waters. Shen Miao gently smiled. So how to persuade Count Pingnan will be handed over to Heir Su. It is just that Heir Su must not tell Count Pingnan about the matter of the military horses and must not mention me. Otherwise, this transaction will be over. Su Mingfeng did not understand. He looked up and saw that the young female in front of him still had the appearance of a young girl. Her brows were delicate and gentle, and when she smiled, there was some innocence and clarity, but when she did not smile, there was a coldness in her eyes which added a bit of majesty. And this kind of pressure was something that even Su Yu had never given Su Mingfeng this kind of feeling. I cannot stay for long. We'll have to trouble Heir Su to send a letter to my residence after making a decision. After the matter is done, I will definitely send it to the veterinarian's place. She stood up and bowed slightly to Su Mingfeng before saying, "Many thanks." Su Mingfeng quickly stood up and said, "Definitely." Shen Miao swept a glance at the screen before turning around and bringing Mo Qing out of the room. After Shen Miao left, Su Mingfeng then let out a sigh of relief. A person walked out from behind the screen. If it was not Xie Jingxing, who else could it be? You have heard it. Su Mingfeng said, "This young lady of the Shen family is more unfathomable than imagined." Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows and did not speak. Su Mingfeng's gaze landed on the table where the teacup that Shen Miao drank from was still there. The rim of the cup was slightly wet. "Speaking of which, that is what you drank from," Su Mingfeng said. "You?" Xie Jingxing unceremoniously kicked him with his leg. Chapter 390. "Io!" Su Mingfeng exclaimed. "Why did you kick me for?" "I also wanted to remind her just now, but she drank so fast, so what can I do?" Su Mingfeng sized Xie Jingxing up. "Moreover, the one who suffered a loss is others and not you. What is there to haggle about?" Xie Jingxing ignored him and sat down in front of the table before asking, "Is what she said about the troops true?" Hearing that, Su Mingfeng's face became ugly and under Xie Jingxing's sharp gaze. He said with difficulty, "Correct? Why did you hide it from me?" Xie Jingxing asked in a threatening manner. Su Mingfeng shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Only father and I discussed this matter privately, and I did not speak of it to anyone else. It is even more impossible for father to do so. Who would joke about something that would cause one to lose one's black veil hat? I originally wanted to tell you after a period of time, but how would young Lady Shen know about this matter? Could it be that they have acquaintances in the military horses? But the people in the military horses would not speak about this matter." Xie Jingxing glanced at Su Mingfeng. Even though Su Mingfeng was a talented person, he was protected watertight in the Su family since young and had not experienced any big storms. Speaking of which, the trump cards in Shen Miao's hands were endless, and it was out of his expectations time and time again. Xie Jingxing gave Shen Miao a retreat strategy, but did not expect that Shen Miao did not use his strategy at all. To unite with the Su family and other familiar officials to submit a memorial to Shen Xian and do the opposite, it could indeed solve Shen Xian's urgent situation. However, the emperor's mind was unfathomable, and if Shen Xian was let off this time, the Shen family's army would have great power, and one day the emperor would see it as a thorn in his eyes. One could hide for a while, but not for a lifetime. It was just that. Did Shen Miao really not think of this layer? Xie Jingxing did not think so. Seeing that Xie Jingxing did not speak, and his usually frivolous face had a frowning and pondering expression, Su Mingfeng also became nervous. He knew that even though this good friend looked casual, he understood the situation in court more thoroughly than anyone else. Su Mingfeng asked, "Why? Is there any problem?" Xie Jingxing shook his head. "What do you think?" "It is indeed highly possible for the horse disease to reach the horse plague. Moreover, this matter is of great importance, and father is the commander in charge of the military horses. Once something happens, the Su family will be the first to bear the brunt." Su Mingfeng said, "If Shen young lady really did not lie to me, I think that it is possible to try, even though it is somewhat difficult to convince father, but I will try my best." Pausing, Su Mingfeng looked at Xie Jingxing. "What do you think about this deal?" Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. "The biggest winner of the transaction is definitely not you, but you also did not suffer a loss." He looked at Su Mingfeng. "Just do as she said." Su Mingfeng lowered his head and was somewhat hesitant. "But to jointly impeach Shen Xian, she is not afraid of overreaching herself." "Did you not discover?" Xie Jingxing said with a smile that was not a smile. "She understands the emperor's thoughts more clearly than you." Su Mingfeng did not speak but saw Xie Jingxing standing up. Su Mingfeng was stunned. Where are you going? Requesting the commander's order. Xie Jingxing returned to his previous lazy look. One must let the Marquis of Lin and take a look. Outside the main doors of the Xie residence, Shen Miao put on her bamboo hat and asked Mo Qing, who was beside her, just now in Su Mingfeng's room, "Did you feel that there was anyone else?" Mo Qing was startled. One did not feel that there was anyone else present. Did young lady discover something? Shen Miao shook her head. Mo Qing's martial arts skills were outstanding, and even he did not discover that there was anyone in the room, so there should be no one else. It was just that Shen Miao felt somewhat strange in her heart. Why did Su Mingfeng keep glancing at the screen? Even though she did not have any martial arts skills, her ability to observe and observe was at the point of perfection. It was more than enough to deal with Su Mingfeng, this kind of immature youth. Chapter 391. Now that he thought about it, the two teacups on the table were a little strange. Shen Miao shook her head and threw the messy thoughts to the back of her mind. No matter if there was anyone behind the screen or who it was, she had already said what she wanted to say to Su Mingfeng, and with her understanding of Su Mingfeng, this matter should be successful. After sitting in the carriage, Guyu asked, "Young lady, will eldest young master Su help master in foreign?" Jingzhe and Guyu were outside and did not know what Shen Miao and Su Mingfeng were talking about and only thought that Shen Miao was asking Su Mingfeng for help. However, the relationship between the Su family and the Shen family had always been like that, so he was somewhat worried. Shen Miao nodded her head. "I will." In his previous life, the entire Su clan was beheaded because of secretly selling soldiers and horses. Although they were still part of the Tian clan, they couldn't tolerate the Count of Pingnan, an established aristocratic family, but they still had to put on a good show. Other than the evidence of selling military horses, there was another matter that was also recorded as a crime. At the beginning of the 69th year of Ming Qi, the military horses that the Count of Pingnan, Su Yu, was in charge of had an illness and even caused a small horse plague. It was just that the Count of Pingnan found a veterinarian from the countryside to control the epidemic. Other than the confidants of the military horses, no one else knew about it. Therefore, no one knew about it. Later on, when Count Pingnan's property was confiscated, this matter was also exposed. Shen Miao was still the Empress and had carefully looked through the dossier on the Count of Pingnan's crimes. Thus, she knew where the veterinarian was staying. In fact, even if Shen Miao did not look for Su Mingfeng today, Su Yu would be able to find the vet to control the epidemic when Xiao Bo's horse plague spread. The reason why Shen Miao did not let Su Mingfeng tell Su Yu about this matter was to make use of the time difference. Su Mingfeng used other reasons to request Su Yu to submit the memorial, and she also used this condition, which was just right. It's just that. Shen Miao's face sunk. Before Shan Yuan died, he had given the evidence of the Shen family defying the emperor's orders to Fu Xiuyi, so it was definitely not complete. Fu Xiuyi actually started to deal with the Shen family now, and this made Shen Miao feel a trace of nervousness. The current her did not have a complete trump card to contend against Fu Xiuyi. The time was not ripe, and there was no opportunity, but it really answered to Xie Jingxing's words, retreat. However, how to retreat was also a problem. To retreat was to retreat, and to retreat in order to advance was also to retreat. What she should be worried about now was how to get out of this unscathed after arranging everything. Because she could not go out for too long and arouse suspicion, Shen Miao quickly returned to the Shen residence. In the Shen residence, everyone saw her return and thought that Shen Miao had complained to Feng and Ning. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyin did not show any signs of returning from the palace. Most likely Shen Gui and Shen Wan had said something, as the rest of the Shen family looked like they were watching a show. She was already used to the Shen family treating the first household as enemies, so Shen Miao did not even look at them and headed back to the western courtyard. Jingzhe and Guyu thought that Shen Miao's mind was heavy tonight and would most likely sit in front of the table for the entire night like yesterday. Who knew that Shen Miao actually went to bed early after washing up, causing the few maids to look at each other in dismay and became more worried for Shen Miao. Shen Miao laid on the bed and looked at the 4 scented sachets hanging on the carved bedpost before slowly closing her eyes. She had done everything she could. The only thing she could do now was to wait. Wait for the Su family to unite with the other courtiers and wait for Emperor Wen Hui's suspicions to flare up. In the palace. In Shu Fong Palace. It was different from the other magnificent palaces, as Shu Fong Palace was considered simple. Even the decorations were just some flowers and plants or paintings. Consort Dong Shu was sitting on the soft couch listening to a tune. The one playing the tune was a young female with a round face and was not considered very beautiful, but the tune she played was rather lively. Consort Dong Shu listened with a smile. Consort Dong Shu was not considered very beautiful, and among the thousands of beauties, she seemed much more ordinary. Even though she was beautiful, she was gentle and did not have any temper. No wonder she was the most unremarkable of the four consorts. Chapter 392. At her side, there was a young man sitting. He was dressed in splendid clothes and had a handsome appearance. His temperament was somewhat cold, but the smile on his face seemed to be somewhat cordial. He said to Consort Dong Shu, "This song is played well." This person was not anyone else but Consort Dong Shu's son, the ninth prince, Prince Ding, Fu Xiu-yi. Consort Dong Shu smiled as she looked at Fu Xiu-yi and waved her hands. The person who was playing the song suddenly stopped. Consort Dong Shu smiled. "Played well? Take some money." The young lady who was playing the song had a flash of joy on her face and quickly carried the zither down. Everyone in Ming Qi's palace knew that the servants in Shu Fong Palace were the most comfortable, as Consort Dong Shu was a kind person and treated the servants very generously. For example, at this moment, one only needed to play a group, and one would be able to get a generous reward. All withdraw. Consort Dong Shu swept a glance at the other palace people. When the palace people heard this, they also withdrew in a well-behaved manner. In a blink of an eye, there was only Consort Dong Shu and her son left in the middle of the palace. Consort Mother's method of training the servants is getting better and better. Fu Xiuyi smiled. It is better to show favors than to make enemies. Consort Dong Shu said with a smile. How many times has Consort Mother told you? Yes, yes, yes. Fu Xiuyi sighed. Unfortunately, with this son's position, it is much easier to make enemies than to show favors. Hearing this, Consort Dong Shu's smile faded a little and asked, "These few days your imperial father is worried about the formidable great general's matter. Do you have confidence on your end?" Consort Dong Shu had never cared about Fu Xiuyi's matters, as the inner palace should not interfere in politics. Moreover, Emperor Wen Hui had 9 sons, and all of them were not easy to deal with. It was better to hide one's incompetence than to show one's incompetence. Now that the time was not clear, Consort Dong Shu was not afraid of being a disfavored consort. Imperial father is concerned about the matter and naturally would not lift it up heavily or drop it down lightly. Fu Xiuyi said, "If I present the evidence, it will coincide with Imperial father's intention and will only go smoothly. I know that you have an idea." Consort Dong Shu shook her head and said lightly, "But Xiao Jiao, now the situation is tense, so you better be more careful. Do not claim credit and let them fight. It is not too late for you to take action after they are tired. This son will listen to Imperial Mother's teachings," Fu Xiuyi quickly said. Consort Dong Shu smiled and suddenly thought of something. "The last time Shin Foreign brought Shin Miao into the palace, you told me not to let Shin Miao hear our conversation. What happened?" The last time Luo Shuiyan and her mother entered the palace, Fu Xiuyi had instructed Consort Dong Shu not to let Shin Miao be present. Afterwards, Consort Dong Shu let Tong Yao bring Shin Miao out. "What kind of person does Lady Mother think fifth Shin young lady is?" Fu Xiuyi asked. "Her looks are not bad. She should be a beauty in the future. However, his personality is too gentle, so he is probably easily bullied." Consort Dong Shu looked at Fu Xiuyi. "Previously heard that she was in love with you, but she does not seem to be as unbearable as the rumors say. Although she is not intelligent enough, she is not to the point of being an idiot." Fu Xiuyi smiled faintly. "Imperial Mother is such a picky person. Yet you can't say anything bad about her?" Consort Dong Shu was surprised for a moment. She looked generous on the surface, but in her heart she was a very picky person. Because Fu Xiuyi had reached the age to look at a foreign, and he was not bad himself. There were also high-ranking families outside that wanted to marry their daughters over. There were naturally a lot of virtuous females, but Consort Dong Shu could always pick out faults and felt that others were not worthy of her son. And in these words, even though she did not praise Shen Miao, there was no contempt in her words. If one thought about it carefully, there was even some bias towards Shen Miao. Among the young ladies of official families, it was the first time that Consort Dong Shu evaluated a person so generously. Chapter 393. So when Fu Xiui reminded her, Consort Dong Shu was also stunned. She was obviously an ordinary young lady. How could she not say anything bad about her? But other than being a little dull, one really did not know what was wrong with her. No desire, no ambition, and her eyes were as calm as a married woman. Consort Dong Shu's heart jumped. This and herself, or rather her disguised self, was it not exactly the same? Consort mother can also see it. Fu Xiui smiled. This Shun young lady is a hidden expert. Consort Dong Shu looked at Fu Xiui in puzzlement. You say that she is pretending? At such a young age, one can pretend other things, but one's temper cannot be controlled. Consort mother. A strange light flashed in Fu Xiuyi's eyes. I have seen her make a fool of herself in public and also saw her shameless expression of love. She was filled with killing intent on the drill ground and shot 3 arrows at the Kai family's gentleman until he could not get off the stage. Now you have seen her silly and dull look. Consort mother think that with so many looks, which one is the real her? Consort Dong Shu's hand that was holding the teacup paused. How could a person have thousands of looks and each look was lifelike and each look was like one's own temperament? That disguise was too scary. What was even scarier was that she had just reached marriageable age. Fu Xiui lowered his head. What he did not say was that at the palace banquet, Shun Miao looked at him with uncontrollable hatred in her eyes. That kind of hatred that went deep into the bone marrow was not the hatred that a young daughter would have when she could not love. That kind of hatred was like one's soul was trembling in anger and could not wait to tear him apart. There were many points that made one puzzled. Consort mother, leaving the Shun family is also a variable. The current state of the country cannot be changed anymore. Fu Xiui lowered his voice. Young lady of the Shen family, it is not as simple as we think. To cut the weeds, one must eliminate the roots, and it would be best to end it before it starts. So this time the formidable great general cannot escape from this calamity? Consort Dong Shu asked. That is not so. Fu Xiui smiled. The Shen family is now the head of the aristocratic families, and if the Shen family is removed, it would only cause more variables. But after taking over the Shen family's power, the Shen family would gradually decline, and when the time is ripe, one can catch them all in one fell swoop. What if there is any change in the middle? Consort Dong Shu looked at him. The Shen family might have other trump cards, so what if they can safely pass through? If they find out that it was you who submitted the memorial, I'm afraid you'll be implicated. Fu Xiui shook his head. It was clearly a friendly smile, but his eyes were ruthless, deceiving the sovereign and disobeying his superiors. This crime is already very big. No matter how powerful he is, he can't let the Shen family retreat. It's just that, he lightly said, this was originally a test of mine. Probe? Consort Dong Shu was somewhat puzzled. Fu Xiui looked at his fingertips. That's right. Previously when Shen Yuan asked him to pay attention to Shen Miao, Fu Xiui did not take it to heart. But after a series of things, including the extermination of Prince Yu residents and Shen Yuan's death, it made him gradually realize that what Shen Yuan said might be true. Shen Miao was an unmarried daughter, and no matter what, she would not be able to do such a big thing. There was only one possibility. There was someone behind Shen Miao. The person behind her was so capable that Fu Xiui had no choice but to be on guard. This time something happened to the Shen family, and only Shen Miao was left behind. Naturally, it was his suggestion to Emperor Wen Hui. It was just that Fu Xiuyi's aim was to see how this fifth Shen young lady of the Shen family, who had hidden so deeply that even he was played in the palm of her hands, would use any method to solve the problem. Who was her helper? But no matter what method was used, Shen Xian would not be able to retreat safely. Fu Xiui clenched his fists. How could one spit out the fat meat that was in his mouth? Chapter 394. There was no doubt in the history books that the Shin family was destined to perish in Mingqi. Tonight in the residence of the Marquis of Lineage, it was not peaceful. In the innermost courtyard in the room, Xie Jingxing took off his outer robe and the door opened with a pa sound. The servant trembled as he stood at the door, afraid that he would implicate himself as he lowered his head and said, "Young master." This lowly one could not stop. The Marquis of Lineage, Xieding, stood at the door and was even angrier when he heard it. "Stop? Try and stop me. I am your father." When did the master of the residence of the Marquis of Lineage change? Xie Jingxing, stand properly for me. Xie Jingxing casually swept a glance at Xieding and lazily threw his robe on the couch. He sat down on the chair and leaned back, putting on an air of a hedonistic son of rich parents. What is the matter for the Marquis to come here in the middle of the night? It was as if he was treating a stranger. Xieding was naturally angered to the point that he was in a complete mess. It was Xiechong Wu and Xiechong Chao, who were following behind Xieding, who revealed a look of indignation. But if one looked carefully, there was a glint in their eyes. Xiechong Chao said, "Eldest brother, father usually do his best for you. How can you speak to father like this? There is no etiquette." "None of your business." Xie Jingxing spat out 4 words. Outside, the elegant, noble, and arrogant little Marquis Xie was like a ruffian every time he faced Xieding and the other two. This made Xieding, who was a self-proclaimed, scholarly general, feel helpless. "Brat." Xieding did not notice Xiechong Chao's livid face and said angrily, "What kind of commander request are you writing?" He slapped the paper in his hand and threw it at Xie Jingxing's face. Xie Jingxing took a look at the paper and raised his eyebrows. "If the Marquis is not satisfied, let His Majesty write another one. Coming here in the middle of the night without sleeping is for this matter?" "Xie Jingxing, what exactly do you want to do?" Xieding flew into a rage. "Do you know what kind of place the northern border is? The commander request is not a joke. You have never commanded the Xie family army before, and I have never taught you before. Do you know how to use them?" When the words were said, Xiechong Chao and Xiechong Wu's eyes flashed with a trace of darkness. The Xie family army was the most valuable asset of the residence of the Marquis of Lineage and was more valuable than the wealth and glory of the Marquis of Lineage. And Xiechong Wu and Xiechong Chao also practiced martial arts, but Xieding never had the intention to let the two brothers take over the Xie family army, but groomed Xie Jingxing as the successor of the Xie family army. Even if Xieding brought the two brothers into officialdom, but once Xie Jingxing really used the Xie family army for himself, even if Xiechong Chao and Xiechong Wu struggled for a lifetime, it would be hard to reach Xie Jingxing's height. "So what?" Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up into a smile. His eyes swept across the place, and there was actually a little bit of evil in them. After using it a lot, it becomes more convenient. "No." Xieding flatly refused. "Come with me to the imperial court tomorrow, and make it clear to His Majesty that this commander-in-chief request cannot be accepted." "Marquis." Xie Jingxing tilted his head and looked at him, as if he was watching a joke. "The commander-in-chief request was requested by me, and if I renege on it with His Majesty. If the Marquis wants to see me lose my head, just say it directly. There is no need to learn from others to beat around the bush." When he finished speaking, he looked at Xiechong Wu and Xiechong Wu with a smile that was not a smile. It was clearly saying that Xiechong Wu and Xiechong Chao did not have good intentions. Both of their expressions stiffened, and Xiechong Wu said, "Eldest brother, father also has good intentions. The terrain of the northern Jiang is complicated, and if something were to happen, not only your own safety would be difficult to predict, even father would be punished and the entire Xie family army would be shamed. You cannot only think about being in the limelight and not care about the future of the Xie family." The meaning behind his words was that Xie Jingxing was completely biting off more than he could chew and did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. He wanted to establish a career but did not know how much weight he had and would only be shamed if he went out. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.